two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast with James and Mark on a Friday. And Mark, we've had, I did notice a comment somewhere saying, geez, you guys talk about the weather a lot, but we do talk about the weather in England, don't we? A lot.
Well, we are English. That's kind of par for the course.
It's all we've got to talk about. We've had a long, hot summer and it came to an end on Friday. Yesterday.
We've had some rain. Yeah, it's not quite as hot today. But yes, we're okay.
We've had
my lawn is pleased to have some rain.
We've had a properly hot summer. Flying into Heathrow over southern England, it's absolutely parched. Everything's brown. Looks like southern Spain. It's been 90 degrees, to use old-fashioned money, almost every day. And we've been out in T-shirts late night. It's been glorious. But it's back to normal. We are on a massive belt of rain at the moment, as I speak. The test match is suspended in London, and it's about 19, to use new money.
Yes, it's kind of normal weather for English summer, but I think it's supposed to be quite nice as we go through August again. So I'm hoping for more of the same.
Well, I don't care.
Why is that?
Because I'm going on holiday on Wednesday.
Yes, that's right.
I've timed it perfectly. So I'm going off just as it all gets bad. So I shall be in New York for the third time this year, then Florida, and then Texas to see my brother. So we're going to record 3 podcast episodes together. And just to trail ahead, so this episode is about a program called Author Accelerator, which is very interesting, quite intriguing. Won't be for everyone, but will be for some people. Might be for somebody very close to this podcast. We're going to talk about author mindset with Adam Croft about all-important mental approach to writing. And then we are going to have a really good episode, a special episode called the Indie Author Toolkit. And this is going to be one of those episodes that we want to be a prominent one in the archive, that new people who come and find us will go and dig this episode out, because it's going to be about the essential tools that you need to get your author career going. Or even if your author career is going, the essential tools you maybe don't realize that you need. So let's start then with this episode, which is about a program called Author Accelerator. And it's been founded by a woman called Jennie Nash. And she has a really good track record behind her of being a very good editor, New York Times bestselling editor, works in the traditional industry. And she has become passionate about working closely with writers to get the best out of them and so that they understand what books are about. Now, there's a bit of a snobbery. We get this every now and again, Mark, don't we? Where someone writes an article saying, oh, the terrible thing about self-publishing is that terrible books get published. And we argue about that. And we say, well, readers can decide. That's the beauty of self-publishing. They can decide if it's rubbish, they won't buy it. If it's good, they'll buy it. But I think Jennie's feeling is that writers can be much better than they are, but it doesn't necessarily come naturally. It's not innate. And I know that more than anybody else. You don't sit there and somebody whispers into your ear, some magic fairy tells you how cause and effect works and writing. You have to go on courses, you have to read books, you basically have to be self-taught. And what Jennie's come up with is a hand-holding sort of chapter by chapter service of an editor. So you don't write your book and then hand it to the editor for the very first time.
That's true. I mean, it's a bit of a generalization. I mean, not everyone is like that. I have a fairy who whispers into my ear. I've
to talk about John Dyer.
Yeah, I've never had any kind of training. I've not had any lessons. I haven't read any craft books. I've just read a lot when I was younger. I think that's the main thing. And turns out I could write, and I'm not special. It's just something that I'm quite good at.
A little bit
special in some ways, yeah. But yeah, for some people, absolutely. I think there is. You can learn. I can improve my writing. I try all the time to improve. Every book I write is hopefully better than the last one. That's always what I'm aiming for. Absolutely for new writers who are just getting into it. He says, looking at someone not too far away. Yes, you, James. It is something that you can certainly learn and improve. So this is interesting.
Well, I've got some news to tell you about after the interview, so stay tuned for that. It's a very interesting chat with Jennie. So let's hear Jennie describe the process, what it is that's on offer. And I'll point out now, before we go into the interview, there's a cost associated which will put some people off. It's not for everybody, but it might be for some people. So let's hear from Jennie. So, Jennie, welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Now, I have to say, when Lucy was proposing this interview, she said, well, Jennie helps people who are struggling to write their books finish their book, James. So why don't you interview Jennie? And I thought that was, frankly, a fairly barbed comment. But anyway, let's talk about this. Let's talk about what you do and how you get, I guess you get authors over the line, right?
Oh, I love that description of what I do. Yeah, my whole business is focused on helping writers write. So when you're finished writing, you're finished with me. I'm a book coach, and that's a thing a lot of people have never heard of. I like to say that a book coach is like having a personal trainer for your writing life. So we help with project management, we help with the actual editorial, we help with the emotion of the thing and the support of doing the work. And we deploy that service while you write. So while an editor would come into a project when it's finished to look at the whole, we're helping all the way through. And you mentioned that I help people who are stuck. That is a lot of times when people come to a book coach and find a book coach. They often, it's a last gasp effort, or they have run into some roadblock, or they have written something that's not getting the traction that they want in the marketplace, and they're trying to figure out why. Oftentimes I'm approached by agents who have projects with writers, and they're trying to figure out, why is this not selling, getting picked up by a publisher. So I am kind of a book rescue figure. And that is in fact what I do.
The book rescuer. That's right. So fascinating. I'm really interested to talk to you about this for obvious reasons, apart from the fact it's really interesting.
Are you stuck?
Well, let's talk about me in a little bit, but let's, because I worry too much. I spend a lot of time talking about my writing on this podcast. It's really for everyone else who's listening. We will talk about me, I promise, in a bit. But let's talk about the process. So I understand a developmental editor who's interested in how the book's working or not working, etc., and helping the writer with it. But I suppose after those conversations, they don't know or have anything to do with how often you're writing and how often you're getting stuff done and whether you're moving towards the end. They just wait for you to then turn up with the next draft, which in my case can be a long time between. You're more hands-on, right? You're not just looking at the story and saying, these are the bits you need to be working on. You have a kind of...
That's exactly right.
Okay, so you explain to me how that works.
So typically the way that it works is that people work with me for a long period of time. So it might be 6 months, 9 months, a year. Many of my clients have been working with me for 2 or 3 years because they work with me on multiple books and they just work with me. I'm just a person that's part of their team. So if you're self-publishing, you're obviously building a team of experts and everyone that you need to bring your product into the world. If you're seeking traditional publishing, more and more you have to enter that game with a really polished, finished product. It used to be that traditional publishers had the personnel and the bandwidth and the money and the capacity to nurture a project and to nurture a whole career. And more that's not true. They're looking for finished, what I call camera-ready work. And so in both of those scenarios, I'm part of the team that helps the writer get there. And so typically the way that it works is we look at the whole project, we look at the writer's goals, we look at how fast they're trying to develop this particular piece of work. And if somebody comes to me at 0, which is the dream, we work on a whole project plan. We hammer out, what is this book? Who is it for? What's going to happen in it? What is the big picture? Why? All those fundamental things that you need to write a good book. And then I would help that writer write forward. And typically we have about 2 deadlines a month is pretty common. And on that, it's a submission deadline. And there are requirements that we come up with together for what that writer needs. Depending on the writer's process and style, if somebody's writing forward really fast, they're going to just turn in pages to me, all writing forward all the way through. If they're the type of writer that likes to edit a little bit as they go, or stop and move forward a little bit as they go, they might turn into me a fresh chapter, a raw chapter, and then an edited chapter. So they're actually revising a chapter as they go. So in other words, you turn into me chapter 1 and 2. And I edit them and give you feedback on them. And we look at that big picture goal, see where you are, where you're going. I turn that back to you with comments, just like a developmental editor would. And then you, in your writing time, work on those chapters, and you would turn in the next deadline a revised chapter 1 and let's say a new chapter 3. So in that way, you're moving forward. So what I like to say is that somebody who works with a book coach ends up with a rough draft that's really more like a 6th or 7th draft, because they've gotten that feedback while they go.
Yeah.
I mean, the most heartbreaking thing in my business is seeing a writer who comes to me with a 300-page manuscript that has some fundamental flaw in chapter 1 or 2. And they've spent 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or 10 years writing this thing that you could look at in a second and see that there's a fundamental flaw. And they just didn't know it, didn't see it, didn't stop to think about it. Now you've got to fix it. So that's why I said in a perfect world, we start at 0. But if they've come to me because, let's say, this is a different scenario. You've started writing, you've got a whole plan, you've got a whole vision, and you get to say chapter 15. And you were great up until chapter 15, and you know where it's going, but you just can't somehow get past chapter 15. You just keep going back to chapter 1, and you keep, revising and iterating on those chapters, and something's not sitting right, and you're stuck for whatever reason. You can't move forward. If somebody comes to me in that situation, it's actually the exact same process. We sit down, we evaluate, okay, why are you stuck? What is that about? We analyze what that problem is. We try to figure it out. Almost 100% of the time, it's a problem back in chapter 1 or 2. We go back and we fix that, and then move that. I think of it like a thread. We move that thread through to chapter 15, and usually that is enough to then get past that roadblock.
And you a couple of questions spring from that. One is that you say we a lot. So is this a team of you?
I do say we. It's interesting that I do that now. I have been a book coach on my own for about 10 years now. And I had a consulting practice, I still do, where I help writers one-on-one. And in my own consulting practice, I got to a place where I couldn't handle the demand that I had. And I was charging quite a lot of money, and it was very frustrating for me. It was frustrating for the people who came to me that, you can only help so many people. It's very intensive hands-on work. So 5 years ago, I started a company called Author Accelerator, which is a book coaching company. And I designed a company that uses my systems and strategies and philosophies to help writers at a more affordable level. And I have 32 book coaches working for me now. And they do this work with writers. We're serving hundreds of writers now as that team. So I still do hands-on work myself, but I'm also the founder and chief creative officer of a company of book coaches.
Wow. And what's your split between trad and indie?
That's a really good question. I would say it's probably 50-50. It's, and what's interesting is, for the most part, we're focused on, well, not for the most part, 100%, we're focused on the writing side. And we're one of the only companies that I know of in the entire publishing industry that is focused solely on the writing. There's a lot of people that you can go to for help on producing your book once it's done. Obviously, where you guys come from, marketing your book, getting your readers, connecting with your audience, making money at the business, all the other pieces of publishing that a writer has to do, and an entrepreneurial writer needs to do today. But we're 100% focused on first, write a good book. That would be our mantra. First, you have to write a good book, and you have to finish your book, right? You can't market a book that isn't finished. So we're so focused on that the reason I hesitated in answering on the split between traditional and indie is that I sort of don't think about that. I sort of don't care about that.
Well, that's a great thing. You're agnostic about it, and that's the way it should be. It's irrelevant, and it's a question I ask because it just occurred to me to ask it. But it's a question that becomes increasingly irrelevant over time, and I think in 10 years' time we'll all be effectively indies. I think the big trads won't exist in the same way. That's my own view, anyway. So that's good. It's a good thing that you're agnostic to that. Okay, well, let's go back to the process. It's a fascinating area, and I can, as somebody who's writing their first book and struggling, in all honesty, to get it finished and starting it again and doing quite a few of the things you just talked about, so constantly revising rather than moving forward. This particularly is of interest to me, and I think a lot of people listen to the podcast who want to be writers like me rather than are at the moment. So I think this is a really interesting area. So let's talk a bit about the development again then. So do you require, I know in your ideal world, someone comes to you and says, I'm going to start writing a book. Can you help me? And they haven't done anything yet, but most people will come to you stuck, having got some stuff down. So you have to kind of reverse engineer some of the work, I guess. But do you expect them to follow a particular process? I mean, some people don't want a plot structure in advance. Other people do need to do that. Do you require them to fit in to some sort of vague outline of a process?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is yes and no. So the yes piece is that if somebody is holding on very tightly to what they're doing already, whether that's their plot or their process, they're not going to be open to help of any kind, period. So when you say, do I require some sort of adherence to something, I do, because you have to be open to really some tough criticism and tough work. It's usually tough. And if somebody doesn't want that, or if they're holding on again very tightly to whatever the thing is, I can't help them. Nobody can help them. So on the one hand, yes, you have to be open to a certain process. On the other hand, the answer is no. What I do is I try to get at, so if you come to me and you're stuck, what I do, no matter who you are or how you're stuck, and I have helped everyone from people like you who are first-time writers trying to get it on the page the first time, to multiple New York Times best-selling writers who, everybody gets stuck. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And so I help extremely accomplished writers who get stuck. And whether it's you or them, whether they're stuck at page, chapter 3 or chapter 15 or chapter 27, the process of helping them is exactly the same. And so we do have to enter into that process. And what it is stepping back and looking at the fundamental elements of the story. So story has fundamental elements to it exactly the same way. Well, you and I were just talking when we were recording this today about you would call it football, the World Cup. I would call it soccer. It's exactly the same as the mechanics of kicking a penalty shot or shooting a free throw in basketball or a golf swing. If you're having trouble with one of those things in sports, you're going to go to a coach who's going to stand back, look at the mechanics of what you're doing and say, okay, there's something demonstrably wrong with the way you're, positioning your hips. And they're going to see that, and then they're going to help you fix that fundamental error. And that's largely what I'm doing. So I'm not so concerned about plot or about a story grid or a certain kind of structure or way of writing. What I'm concerned about is, all right, let's step back and look at those story fundamentals. And there are fundamental things to every narrative that make it work or not work. And I think that part of the problem that I see is that nobody's ever been taught those. They're not things that we teach. When you go to a writing workshop or a conference, or you read a book on writing, or you go work with a famous author, oftentimes you're working on character development, how to write dialogue, how to write a good scene, what I would call in many ways, that's the frosting. I mean, it's kind of a generous view of what the frosting is, but the actual thing itself, you almost never see that taught because it's not the fun stuff. Right?
Yeah.
It's not the fun stuff. It's not the stuff when you sit and you dream about your book or you imagine your book. You're usually seeing your character. You're seeing a scene. You're seeing this cool thing happen. You're trying to get all that right. And this is a much deeper level. So we, again, no matter who it is or where they are in the process, they come to me and I pull back and I do that thing that the athletic coach would do. And I look at those fundamentals, and oftentimes there is something glaringly obvious wrong with them that we can fix and shore up and then figure out how to move forward. Sometimes the thing that's wrong is what I call a fatal flaw. And that's not with a character, that's with the story itself. And a fatal flaw would be, this is just never going to work. There's a fundamental flaw in this that is never going to work. And it might be part of how that story has been conceived, or a narrator point of view problem where the narrator can't be in the place they need to be at the crucial moment, or, things like that. So it's much deeper than a particular process, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So I think it does. So an example might be that you need somebody to move away from the first person to make the story work, or something fundamental that affects the entire book. If you talk about, I'm trying to think of an example of a fatal flaw. If somebody's written something in the first person, you work out that they're never going to be in the right place you perhaps is the answer to be third person for that. So
that might be something, but a fatal flaw. I'm trying to think of a recent project that I looked at that had a fatal flaw that I could give you an example of. So I'm thinking here. All right, so here's an example. I worked with a writer, a multiple New York Times bestselling writer, who was actually switching genres. That's a lot of times people come to me when they need support switching genres. And she had a manuscript that was very bloated, very, very long, very convoluted. And it was her first, even though she was a very good writer, it was her first time in this particular genre. And it was, in my mind, it was a wreck. It was incomprehensible. She had so much going on, so many subplots, so many voices that had agency. So agency meaning a character who gets to speak, okay, or have the narrator be coming through their eyes. And it was, the first 5 chapters were 5 different speakers, and they each had just all this stuff going on and all these subplots and layers, and it was literally impossible to read. And the thread of the main story was really great, and it was there. You could see it, you could feel it. The narrative drive for it was there. But what we had to do was strip that down. So it had nothing to do really with what happened in the story or the plot or the voice or anything. It was just all too much. And so what we did was we pulled out some subplots, and we surgically removed these subplots, and it was a lot of work, and it was what I call heavy lifting, almost physical work, because when you have a manuscript, it's a physical entity. There are a lot of words on a page, and they carry a lot of weight, and they're locked together, and we had to unlock this thing and extract this whole thing. And when we did that, it was just amazing. All of a sudden, this story was light. It was it happens to be a story with some humor to it, and it was actually absolutely not funny right before, and all of a sudden it was funny. It was light. It tripped along. That narrative drive just pushed all the way through, and is fantastic. So it's that would be a fatal flaw. It's usually something in how the writer has conceived of their story, if that makes sense.
Okay, right from the beginning. Okay, I do understand that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you mentioned the fact that you've got this team of people now working to make it affordable for people. So you better tell us how much the service costs and a bit about the practicalities of how it works.
Okay, so Author Accelerator is built on a core program offering that's a 6-month coaching package. And the reason that we did it that way is that we used to have a package where you could dip in and out. You could come for a month of support and then go away and write, or come for 3 months and go away and write. And we found that people didn't finish. And I did not want to offer a service that was not effective. And so we changed our whole concept of what this is. And what it is you have to commit to 6 months. And what I always say is we hold your feet to the fire. Because what I have found is that accountability is so primary to the creative process. And if you have all the time in the world and you have no accountability, no deadlines, no skin in the game, you're not going to finish. There's going to always be something in your life that comes up. I mean, life is very busy and very complicated. And to find time to write something, especially in the situation where you are nobody's waiting for your book. Nobody's paying you to do this. Nobody really cares, to be perfectly honest, that you finish your book. And it's very easy for you to then just not do it. Or to do the thing that's going to pay the bills, or to do the thing, it's kind of a really strange thing to sit in a room by yourself and make up a story, right? When you think about it, normal people don't do that. And I'm sure you have friends who are normal people, and they're like, when are you going to finish your book? Mm-hmm. And what's happening with your book? And are you really writing a book? And it's such a cliche to say, I'm working on a novel. Well, it takes a really long time to write a novel, and it takes a long time to have something to show, and that it's in that gap that we operate. So that accountability, the reason that it's 6 months is because that accountability is so key. And if you're paying money, you're going to meet your deadlines. That is just the cold, hard fact that we have learned.
Skin in the game, as you say.
Skin in the game. And people will feel, I hate to say it because it's kind of horrible, but they'll feel ashamed if they don't make their deadline. They're embarrassed. They don't want to let their coach down. Someone is waiting for their work. So it's a 6-month program, and it's $450 a month for that 6 months. So it comes out to $2,600. And that sounds like a lot of money. But if you think about what you spend going to a workshop, going to a conference, going to, a writing class, buying books, buying video courses, you probably are already spending that money anyway. And this gives you that 2-time a month deadline where someone's waiting for your work and giving you feedback on your work. We commit to giving your feedback to you in 72 hours. Okay. So in publishing, normally, if you're waiting for a reply from an editor or an agent or
a long time, yeah.
Oh my gosh, it's forever.
You're often in a queue, so.
Oh, and it's a horrible waiting process. So we commit to that 72-hour turnaround time, and you're going to get detailed feedback on what's going on and what that coach thinks you need to do. And what I always say is that we're a mirror. We hold a mirror up to what you're doing. And we might say, we see X happening. And you may then say, I see X too, but I like X and I'm going to keep X. I'm going to do what I need to make X work. Okay. It's not, people are often afraid
it's not prescriptive. It's a dialogue with an expert. Yeah. Okay. Well, people who are regular listeners to this podcast will know how much you're speaking to my position here. So I'm pretty much at the point of saying, who do I make the check to? This is, and I know for some people it's going to be very expensive, and but for others, and I do include myself here, this is a sort of service that's exactly what I need. And so I told you I was going to talk about me a little bit. So.
Well, and it gets worse. I can tell you that it gets worse on the money front, because okay, let's say 6 months, you're very committed, you finish your draft. Well, now you have to revise it. So a lot of people come back for another 6 months to revise it. And then we have a process where we help you if you want to pitch to traditional publishers, the whole agent pitch process. We have a track for that. So we're committed to helping you, as I said before, get all the way through to actually finishing the work.
So in 6 months, would you expect somebody, I suppose it depends at what point they come in, you're expecting that to be first draft, but the way you describe the process, it's a partly edited, it's a developmentally edited first draft, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it's really amazing how much better that draft is with the guidance in the moment. And again, it doesn't matter if you're executing those edits while you go or if you're saving them all for later. You learn the reason that I did this, the reason that I do this, the reason that I started this company is that I actually I've been in publishing for more than 30 years. My first job out of college was at Random House. I worked for many years as a magazine writer at top New York magazines. I've been on that side, the much more publicity-oriented side of writing. I have published 6 books myself with big 5 publishers. I've had multiple agents for many, many years my own self. I have a speaking agent. I have taught at UCLA, University of California, Los Angeles writing program, which is the largest adult education writing program in the country. I started this company. I've been in this business a really, really, really long time. And I have experienced it from many different sides. And I believe that the very best way to learn how to write and to write the best book that you can is with one-on-one help. It's wildly inefficient, but it's the basis on which traditional publishing used to be built. That golden age of publishing where an editor like Maxwell Perkins helping F. Scott Fitzgerald and Hemingway, that type of model was incredibly nurturing. And there's a gorgeous book that I would recommend to anybody. It's called Dear Genius. And it's the letters of an editor named Ursula Nordstrom. And she was a famous children's book editor. And I can't right now remember where she was, the publisher where she was, but she edited Maurice Sendak and Laura Ingalls Wilder and not Stuart Little. Why can't I think of the author's name? Who wrote Charlotte's Web? Stuart.
Yeah, I know. I've read both of them at some point in my life, but
I'm so embarrassed. I'm like, anyway.
Always blank on interviews.
Ursula Nordstrom, these letters to her writers, they're so caring and nurturing, and it's about the writer's life, and it's about their doubt, and it's about their process, and it's about their ideas, and it's about, their wife is sick, and their garden is dying, and all the things that happen in a life, and she's helping with that and nurturing with that, and you can read it, and you can feel it, and you think, oh man, I want that. And I think that model, although it was incredibly dismissive of a lot of writers, we live in a time right now where the world of writing is cracked wide open. Anybody can write and publish, and it's an amazing thing. But what we lost is when back in the day when those publishers chose a very few writers, those very few lucky writers, they got all the attention and all the support and all the nurturing. And I think that's the best way to learn how to write. And, you can be sitting in a classroom listening to a lecture. You can be sitting in a workshop watching other people's work get ripped apart. You can be in all the ways you can be in writing. The only way you really get better is for somebody to be paying attention to your words and your story. Yeah. It's not theoretical. It's your story. And so I started this whole thing because I was frustrated that didn't exist anymore. I had a taste of it when I was edited. I had a 3 big deal at Penguin. It was before it was Penguin Random House. And I had the most amazing editor who cared about me, cared about my work. It was just on the cusp of the sea change that we now see. It was a little bit that old school way, and I had a taste of that, and I just see that it's not here anymore. And that's why I did this, is because I just think it's what writers need, and I have seen it work so many times that it's thrilling to be able to give that to writers.
Yeah, and it's funny, isn't it? How nobody else works in the way that trad publishing now works. As you say, they're lazy because billions of people want to write, so they just send their manuscripts time and time again. So they can then take completed manuscripts and do some polishing on it. So they don't have to work with the authors in the way that in the old days, where there are fewer people, I guess is what it is. But wouldn't it be funny if they taught people to fly like that? So there's a jumbo jet. Go off for 6 months, see how you get on, then come back and show me your first draft of how you learned to fly. I mean, there's no other, I can't think of any other industry where you don't work side by side with somebody to train them in how to do it.
It's really true. And it's really, I think that it's resulting in, we can all see what the result is, that traditional publishers don't take many risks anymore. It's either a celebrity writer, a writer who already has a massive platform, or a very, very small percentage of the lucky few who get plucked out. And even if you get plucked out, and the research and development at a traditional publisher, as you've said, is a chaotic system. It's throwing spaghetti at the wall. Oftentimes they purchase a book that they think might have promise, and they maybe throw a little marketing dollars at it. And by little, I mean they give a $5,000 advance to the author, or a $10,000 advance, and a small marketing budget, and we'll see what happens. Well, nothing happens usually. Yeah. So, what they're looking for are the books that are going to be big hits. That's kind of where
The Girl on the Train, Da Vinci Code, and every trad publisher. There's a new imprint started in London last year, and I went to their sort of opening reception, and they almost exactly uttered those words. We're looking for the next girl on the train. Of course you are.
Right.
So you don't have to do anything
exactly
then, do you?
So the risk taking, which used to be, let's look for a new writer, let's look for a promising writer, let's look for, oh wow, this is an interesting, quirky, different project, that's kind of gone as well. And so what, a writer, where are they going to get that support to know what their vision is and what they want to write, and how they can achieve their vision for their book?
Yeah. So E.B. White, by the way, and
oh my gosh, how embarrassing!
I have to say it because people will be shouting at the podcast because they know the answer or they haven't heard the answer. So E.B. White, Charlotte's Web,
E.B. White.
Stuart.
So these letters that Ursula Nordstrom writes, it's to people to E.B. It's amazing.
There's nothing new under the sun. So you feel you're doing something, you're in this hole and you can't get on, and you're doubting yourself, and you think it's all rubbish and it doesn't work. And then you read letters from some great writers from the 1930s or 40s doing exactly the same, of course. So that's why I guess that book, Dear Jean, should be a really good book for people to read, to realise that there's form for this.
And to realize that the doubt, there's so many good books about creativity and doubt and how to get past it and what it is and what to do with it. But it doesn't stop the fact that every writer feels it and gets into it. And what you're describing is, if you think about it, it's what we were talking about before. You kind of raise your hand and you say, I'm going to sit alone in a room for a few years and make this thing up in my head and spend all this time to get it on paper. And I'm not going to show anybody, and I'm not going to talk to anybody about it. And I'm just going to sort of pray that it's working and that there's going to be an audience for it. And then I'm going to try to, get it to sell. Like, it's nuts. Who would do that? It's nuts. And I think that people who are called to write can't help it. If you could help it, you wouldn't do it. That's what I would say. If you could help it, you would choose some way else to spend your time, because it doesn't make any sense. It is a crazy thing. And when I talk about lay people who are not in the writing business, if you talk to them about, people used to say to me, businessmen would say to me, so how much money per hour do you think you made on the writing of that book? And, that's the way a lot of the world thinks about time and the use of time. And I would become this blubbering idiot because the numbers would be spinning in my head, and I would think, maybe like 10 cents an hour.
Yeah.
You know? And then they think, well, why on earth would you do that? And the reasons that we are called to this and the reasons that we do it, that's actually what I end up spending a lot of time talking to writers about, what I call the deep level why. And there's usually a reason, A, that you're called to write, and B, that you're called to this particular story. Mm-hmm. And I like to, one of the ways to get unstuck is to go back to that spark of the moment when this idea took hold in your head. Because there are so many ideas that are available to you today, and there's so much input. There's news headlines, there's other books you read, there's movies, there's people, there's moments out in the world, there's so much input into our brains. And why this story? Why did this story stick? And I have read something about you and your story and your background and your family, and I see the jet behind you on the thing. So there's something, and I know I'm turning attention to you, but it's just because it's easy because we're talking. There's something in your background, in your worldview, in your philosophy, in your idea about people that is tied up in this story that matters to you a lot. And I try to get people to break that down and to really think about, why do you care about this story? And especially if it's a high action thriller or some sort of a very dramatic plot, it's easy to dismiss that question and say, well, just because it's cool, there's like this cool thing and there's this cool thing that happens, but that's not the answer that I'm looking for. The answer I'm looking for is, that story took hold of you. It didn't take hold of me. And there's a reason it took hold of you. And there's things that you know, and there's things I actually think you believe that you're trying to capture in this story. And oftentimes when people get stuck, it's because they lose sight of that. So the whole thing about doubt, like, can I do this? Am I good enough? Does anybody care? Is the story any good? Those aren't actually the right questions. The fundamental question is, why do you care? What are you trying to say about the world through this book? And every book is trying to say something. Every single book is trying to say something. The books that we read as children, the myths and the classic children's stories are very obvious. They're moral frameworks for how to live a human life, and adults read them to children to help teach them about people and the world and getting on and society and the things that they believe. So we've got these moral frameworks in young people's literature that's so clear. And it's also slightly clearer in literature like middle grade or young adult. A lot of adults really like to read young adult literature because that why is really clear. It's oftentimes a protagonist searching for their identity, searching for how do you live in the world that is so actually fundamentally flawed and tragic, and how do you love flawed people? These are what these books are about, even though it's a vampire.
Yeah. Well, Ready Player One's a good example of that, isn't it? It's a book lots of adults liked.
Totally. And because it's grabbing us at that heart level that we don't get in day-to-day life. We do not get it. That's why we love our books, because we get it. And you know that feeling when you're deeply immersed in reading a book and you feel as if the writer knows you, or is, like you're looking over your shoulder. Like,
yeah, it's written to you.
How do they see me? How do they know that's how I feel? That's why we love books. So for you, I would stop and go back and think, what about this? What am I trying to say in this book? What am I trying to convey? What's my argument? If I'm on a soapbox, what am I up there talking about? Because that's exactly what you're doing. And oftentimes you're stuck because you lose sight of that, or you get fuzzy about that, or you start thinking about only the plot, all right, well, how am I going to get my guy over there? How am I going to get this conflict to be amped up? Or how am I going to, you start moving puppets around on a stage. Whereas if you go back to that deep level why, it's usually embodied in your protagonist. Then you can have that protagonist know what they're about, why they're there, what they're trying to prove. And you can then see that thread in the story and figure out, okay, he's trying to, I don't mean a message like waving a flag and hitting the reader over the head. It's baked into how they behave. And that's, so when I talked at the start of our interview about the fundamental elements of story, and that's what I do with everyone. And if they come in stuck, that's what I'm talking about. We get down to that really fundamental, it's deeper than plot. It's why are you even doing this? And every once in a while, I do get a writer. This actually just happened. I taught a class and I had a writer whose answer to all of these questions was, I actually don't care about the story. Right. I decided I don't care. And I've already spent 5 years on it and I hate it. And I was doing it for all these different reasons that I don't feel, that I don't like, that I don't believe, and I don't want to do it. And my decision is to walk away. And I think that is a fantastic outcome. And, I really tried to support that writer in making that very brave decision because she was just throwing stuff at it and there was no there. It's never going to work.
Wow. So sometimes that's the answer. Okay. Again, where do I write the check to? No. Let me, we can talk. I want to talk a little bit more about the process. We're really eating up through the time, which is fantastic. But it's going to be it is an absorbing interview. Listening to you talk about the process that so many of us think about so many hours of the day, to hear the sort of clarity that you're bringing it. Now, I do realise that. Again, going back to the price for $450 a month is out of reach for a lot of people, and for others, they'll see it as an investment, and there'll be a few people in between. So. And we thought a little bit about doing the interview, by the way, because Mark is very tuned into some of the more predatory services on offer to authors, and he's very sensitive. And we've actually not covered a few companies and services because he feels that they are abusing it. But he looked at yours, and I think this interview will completely convince him that this was the right thing to do. It's not necessarily the cheapest offer anyone's going to get to help them with their writing, and it includes the developmental editing as well, so I think people have to factor that in. And in 6 months you can get a lot done. That's me summing up everything. Here's the question. Sorry, go on.
Okay, there's just two things I want to say in response to that, and I don't mean to just be selling my own thing, but I did just do a course on Creative Live. That's a 6-hour course on story fundamentals that is $129, and they usually have it for at least half price because they often are running specials. And you can go to Creative Live, look up Jennie Nash. It's called Write Your Book, and that is everything, all of my teachings packaged in a 6-hour thing for a very small price. So I just say that to people who can't afford the other. And then I just have to respond to the thing about the predatory services because they make me want to cry and they make me want to scream. And I just urge people when they're looking for help with their writing to not fall into the trap of thinking that it's easy. If anybody is promising you super fast, if they're promising you success, a bestseller, or this or that, if they're promising speed, if they're promising anything, don't believe it. Because if this were easy, we would all be best-selling novelists. We would all be making, we would not have jobs, we'd be making our money that way. It's not easy. And I just really dislike those things as well. And I see how hard the people work who embrace the fact that writing is hard and embrace the inherent risk of it, that you could do all this work and not have something to show for it. And So I thank you for seeing that in the work that I do, because I stand in very firm opposition to those things. And look, I wake up every day and I think, gee, I wish I'd come up with one of those slick systems that makes a ton of money off of writers. Because what I do is really hard to explain. It's really hard to sell. It's the most unsexy thing in the universe. Like spend all this money and time doing this thing that might not work.
Yeah.
Like, that's a great sales offer, So I just had to jump in and say those things. You have a question for me?
It's a more practical question. So the way that you talked about the process with the author, I understand obviously a lot of this is done by email, but is there Skype? Is there actual live chats involved in this?
There is. At Author Accelerator, in that Manuscript Accelerator program, our main program, you get a 60-minute call a month. So you get the 2 deadlines and back and forth on email with the comments that you're going to get, and then a 60-minute call with your coach. And the initial call is to set everything up, to set up the project, to understand the goals, to see where the writer comes in, and you work on the project plan according to your life, because you might have a holiday, you might have a vacation, you might get sick, you might have some big work thing, and we work around that within that six month constraint. And this is all designed, the work that I do as a book coach one-on-one, and I'm just going to say this so that we're not beating around the bush about it. I charge $2,500 a month to do that same work as a very high priced one-on-one coach who gets excellent results. My clients land top agents, they get big book deals, they win indie awards. I've been doing this for a long time. I charge a lot of money. And what I do at the $2,500 a month level is much more intense. You get more access. I'm going to respond to your email instantly for the most part, even on weekends and holidays. We're going to talk all the time. It's going to be a much more intensive process. And the Author Accelerator system is based on what I do and what I know to be successful, but we've put the constraints around it so that we can make it affordable for people. But it's the same process. And I hire all the coaches. I train them. They have to shadow a seasoned coach. They get oversight for several months, and we have ongoing training as a group where we're always learning and always growing and always trying to serve writers better. So I'm not, it's not a marketplace where, just here's a bunch of people who could help you, you come choose. It's a process built on my philosophy and system.
Okay. And in terms of word count and production rate, this is something that's discussed at the beginning and expectations are set. But do you have a kind of minimum, an idea of what you think authors should be doing?
Yes, we have a 20-page per deadline recommendation, and that would be 20 pages every other week. So that's 10 pages a week. That comes from a lot of water under the bridge of working with writers. I think that and you can do that, maybe you can't actually write 10 pages a week. Maybe you can't. I don't think that whole thing about writing every day, or you write the way you write. Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild, famously says she doesn't write every day. She goes in spurts. She has ups and downs. But if you've got that deadline and that accountability, and I've got to get 20 pages in by X date, however you get it done, you get it done. I just think I've found in my work that anything less than that, people tend to be dragging their feet. You can't let too many weeks go by or days go by without producing something. So that's the way that's our recommendation. There are occasions, I have often worked with writers who are on a very strict deadline for a publisher. Once you get successful in publishing, then they want you to write faster and produce. And that's true with self-publishing as well. If your audience is waiting for your book, you've got to crank it out. So I have recently worked with several writers who have written extremely long manuscripts in a very short period of time. And they've kicked it out based on those deadlines. So you can do that. I have rarely seen somebody go a lot slower and do well. there's something that gets lost in the momentum.
Yeah. Okay. Do you know, we've been chatting for an hour. It's been that's my 60 minutes is up. It's been absorbing. I think particularly for me, because of where I am, but there's lots of people listening to this podcast are in a similar position, and it's been helpful regardless of whether people engage your or other professional services. It's been incredibly useful to hear this talked about and the process talked about. And ultimately, I suppose, to make it really affordable and cheap for people, you might be able to find somebody else, for instance, in our SPF community, a more experienced writer who's written a lot of books to help keep you accountable, who could create a sort of framework if they're not able to afford the sort of higher end services. That accountability, which is a strangely missing thing in the world of writing, apart from, I guess, if you do have a trad publisher, but even then, or was it Douglas Adams said, I love the sound of, I love deadlines, I love the whooshing sound they make as they go by. They're not, they're not serious deadlines.
I do have a suggestion. If people can't afford this type of thing, or it's not suited to them, or what have you, here's what I would suggest. Find an accountability partner, and don't have it be about what they think of your writing, because I think there's a really big danger in people who don't know how to analyze and teach narrative design, giving comments on your narrative. I think it's a recipe for disaster. And a lot of writing groups are based on that. What I would do instead is have that person be accountable to you for those deadlines. And you're going to turn work into them, or say you've done it, or whatever the mechanism is, and have some sort of, you've got to have some sort of skin in the game, where if you don't meet that deadline, you have to buy them a drink, or you have to, whatever the thing is. But that piece is the most critical piece. And I think people get mixed up in, they have a mechanism for accountability, but they mix it up with that feedback piece from somebody who's not qualified to give them feedback.
Yeah.
So I would say just to have be support, accountability, community, like get together with your writers group, talk about how hard it is, talk about the doubt you feel, talk about what you're doing in your story, but don't actually spend the time on the pages. Spend the time on the process and on what it's like to be a writer, and have that accountability. I think that's the best thing somebody can do who doesn't want to invest at this point, is get support for the work of it, not the actual thing.
A little knowledge is a dangerous thing, as they say. Jennie, thank you so much indeed for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We were just talking about, you're down near the ocean in LA, but I think it's probably hotter in the UK today than it is in LA. It's absolutely sweltering, but it's been a really absorbing interview for me, and I hope for the listeners as well. So I want to say thank you very much indeed for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you for having me. It's been fun.
So there she is. I mean, first of all, Jennie spoke lots of common sense about what writers need to get the job done, keeping each other honest. She's slightly circumspect about writers helping each other with structure and development, because she thinks editing is a very particular job, and it's like a little knowledge can be a dangerous thing. Taking advice from other writers isn't necessarily going to be good for you if they're not strong editors, but having a buddy who sets deadlines for you is a really good thing. And of course, that appealed to me more than anything else listening to Jennie, was having a process where you weren't going to basically put off writing because you're not sure structure-wise, all these sort of little demons in your head that stop you moving on with the book. You would be in this process where you'd be forced to work out those problems and get professional advice and get deadlines set and start producing work. So guess what I did after this interview?
What did you do?
Well, obviously I contacted Jennie and I said, I am up for this. I am up for this process. And she's $2,500 a month to work with Jennie one-on-one. She's expensive, but as she explained, the Author Accelerator process, which uses her team of editors, obviously freelance editors, I guess, across mainly America, that's a service that's $450 a month, as she explained. And I have dug into my own pocket, and I've signed up for this. In fact, I said to her right at the beginning, because we have this podcast with lots of listeners, and we're the most important podcast in publishing, I think. I just thought that, was there a danger that Jennie would say to me, do you know, the publicity for me is great. I'm going to do you for free, so to speak. I'm going to let you do it for free. And of course, I didn't want that. I had to have, I think she says this in the interview, you've got to have something in the game, whatever that expression is. Skin in the game. So I did say to her right from the beginning, I'm paying for this service. Now, what Jennie's done actually is, because she's intrigued, she knows a bit about my book, having listened to the podcast. She's quite intrigued by it. So she said that she wants to be a part of it at the beginning and then hand me off to her editors. So I've got a first call. I'll tell you where I am actually. So Jennie sent me basically the initial application for the process. And it is an application. So they test your motivation for writing. They want to know, Jennie's really keen on understanding why you have to tell this story. And she thinks until you understand that, it's going to be difficult for you to actually write it. They also get you to do some writing, write a couple of chapters. So they need to know that you can write a scene, for instance, and that they're working with the right person. So I've got through that for you. And she then sent me quite a lot more to do and gave me some feedback and notes on the stuff I'd done, which I've done again. I'm finding this bit difficult now because it's more challenged. She's challenged a lot of the things. I've been working with this story for so long now. And suddenly she's saying, well, that's why that doesn't work. There's no cause and effect. You know, this stuff sits there and it stops the book cold. And so I'm having to kill a lot of babies. And I've got my first call on Monday. So I don't know. I mean, I know when I told you the price of it, and I know you are very cautious about, lots of people listen to this podcast, and there is a lot of ways to throw money at people in self-publishing and publishing. And it's very, very important that people spend their money wisely and get value for money. And this is expensive. So $450 a month. So what's that? $2,500 to do the 6-month program. Now, I can afford it, and I think it's an investment in the book. And even if this book is not commercially successful for me, it's a process I want to go through to learn how to write and move on to the next one and maybe devise a new series that will be more commercially acceptable, potentially successful. But it's not for everyone. I understand that.
Yeah, that's one of the things I am quite keen to set out, is that lots of people listening are bootstrapping their books, and that means that their money might be a bit tight for them, and I don't want people to feel this is a magic bullet, because it won't be, and it's not necessary. But as I said, I've never done this. It's something I didn't feel I ever needed to do. On the other hand, I can see the benefits of having someone, certainly for the accountability part. If you've got a deadline and there's a call, you will get that stuff done. So if some people will struggle to do that. Writing is the kind of thing, lots of reasons you can put off the writing because you don't think it's good enough, or you don't have time, or whatever. Most of those are excuses. So to have someone on the other end of a phone line, basically holding your feet to the fire, I think is a value. There's a value to that. There are other ways to do it. You can get accountability buddies. We've thought about doing that in our courses before, to pair people up so that they can hold each other accountable as they go through the process. So yes, this is quite expensive. I will be interested to see how effective it is. What you think about it after 6 months' time. We'll have another chat about it then, and give an honest review. I mean, we have no, to use the phrase, we have no skin in the game. I have no skin in the game, and if it doesn't work, we will probably say that. We will say that.
Absolutely, yeah.
People, it's worth looking into. I think it's an interesting idea. It is expensive, but it could be good value for money. So let's see what comes out over time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a comprehensive process and service, and it's I think it's coincidentally good for the podcast that I have signed up for it on a personal level, and I'm enthusiastic about it because people are not going to be left in any doubt after the 6 months what I think about it, and I'll probably blog along the way as well, as long as Jennie's happy for me to blog some of the systems and processes that you go through as part of it. But it's been good.
If only we had a blog. Oh, wait a minute.
Yes. Let's talk about our blog. It's time to blog.
We can, yes. We are, just kind of a bit of a sideways jump. We are going to be blogging a bit more often. So we have appointed an editor, a kind of head of content. So we will be blogging more often on the SPF website. So got some quite good stuff coming up on there, and other bits and bobs that will be a few changes coming down the line over the next 6 months or so that we're quite excited about.
Yeah, we should say welcome to Tom, shouldn't we? So Tom Ashford is our new member of the SPF team. We had a lot of applications for this position, and
over 100, which I
over
went through
100
myself.
And really annoyingly, really good. I mean, I read through loads of them, and they were fantastic. And frankly, we could have chosen
10.
Yeah, we could have picked 10 people.
I had 3 folders, yes, no, and maybe, and there were 10 in the yes folder. I would have been very happy to have picked any one of them.
Yeah, so if you applied, thank you very much indeed. And if you didn't get it, it's very likely not because you weren't good enough, but in the end you have to make a decision, and we chose one person. So Tom's joined us, and welcome to Team SPF, Tom. Looking forward to that blog. I mean, the reason we're doing it, and it's worth mentioning this now, and I've just been editing the Pinterest for Authors course, which goes into Ads for Authors this week. And it's a reminder in that course because Pip Reed, for her non-fiction world, is very keen on blogs, and you hear things up and down about blogs, but it's a very proven way of attracting traffic to go somewhere.
In non-fiction, I don't personally think it works very well for fiction, so I don't blog very much. I do a little bit, but not too much on my website. For non-fiction, I think there is a value to it, and obviously, there's a number of reasons why I think this is interesting. Kind of at a base level, it's good for SEO. So we will be easier to find SPF for people who are searching on Google looking for self-publishing. We'll start to rank more highly in those searches. And also because it's another way to deliver content. We've got lots of good stuff that we'd like to pass on to the community. And it's a good way to do that. And some people prefer reading than listening. So I put out a post in the community a week or so ago asking whether people listened to read the transcript that we put together for the podcast. And that costs us about $5,000 a year to do that, so it isn't cheap. And we were looking, if it's not being used, we would stop doing it. But to my surprise, it was about 50-50. So of the people who responded to the poll, 50% said that they read it. So we'll keep doing it. That's something that there's obviously a value to that, not just for people who might not be able to listen because they're hard of hearing perhaps, but just some people prefer to read, and they can read quicker than they can listen. So
yeah,
we'll keep doing that. And the same thing goes really for blogging. It's just another way for us to deliver valuable content. We've got loads of ideas for things that we're going to be covering on the blog, and we're just in the process of building the template right now. And I would imagine we will have our first articles in the next couple of weeks. So definitely worth keeping an eye on that.
Yes, and some guest blogs from me on Author Accelerator. So just a reminder, you can go to authoraccelerator.com to check out Jennie Nash's service, and if you're intrigued by that, you think it's going to help you. Good. So next week we are going to announce the next book lab selection, and we'll also welcome our newest Patreon listeners. We'll do that next week. I was supposed to do that today, but I forgot. So we need to do it at the top of the podcast. We'll do that at the beginning of Adam Croft's podcast next week. And then we will talk about author mindset with Adam Croft, a man who knows how to get it done. And he has got it done, hasn't he, over recent years?
He's done all right.
He's done all right. There's always a little bit of simpering competition between you and Crofty, I think.
There's no competition.
Okay, and on that dismissive note, let's say goodbye. I hope the rain on my shed hasn't been too off-putting. It is tipping it down here in the UK, but we will be back next week to talk about mindset. Have a good week writing and a great week selling your books. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.